Hello. Right, I'm going to talk about books. Remember those? So, these days, whenever I want to do something new, my first port of call, as with probably most of you out there, is to look on the internet, on YouTube. And it's amazing what you can find. For things like what I'm going to talk about today is blacksmithing, and for things like blacksmithing, to see somebody actually demonstrating a technique is utterly invaluable. But to get all the meat behind that demonstration, that's where books come in. And I would say a good book is even better than a good teacher in a sense, because you can consult a book whenever you like, at your own leisure. When you're in the middle of your own project, you can grab the book for reference, and it's just there. Obviously teachers have their place too. So we'll start with blacksmithing. Each of these episodes I'm just going to go through a pile of the books that I've accumulated, and I'm going to recommend one or two of what I feel to be the most useful. When I started blacksmithing, which was a long time ago, I didn't have YouTube. I don't think I even had internet access here. I think I probably had to go to the library and use the internet from there. So there wasn't much to find apart from books, and there wasn't even anywhere I could go and ask which books were worth reading even. I ended up just buying all the ones that I could, one way or another, through second-hand shops or through directly. And so I've ended up with quite a pile. Now not all of them are all that good. Let's go through what I've got then. So there's a company that I'm going to mention a few times called Lindsay Publications, and what they do is take old out of print books and then reprint them. My favourite non-fiction book of all comes from there, which isn't going to be covered today, but something to look forward to. These two little books, got one here called Farm Blacksmithing and another called Forging. One of them here, it says first published in 1901 and the other 1918. So Lindsay Publications, which is an American company I believe, they're also available here. I was buying them for a company called Camden Miniatures, I think it was. The great thing about these, because they're out of copyright, they're very cheap, and because this is from an era where all this stuff was done absolutely routinely, they're very much written by people that just got on and did this stuff. So very useful, practical guides. You're not going to find anything decorative in here, you're not going to find anything particularly fancy, but it's a really good grounding. So those two were good. I've got a couple of books here. I would say, yeah, these three. So the only recommendations I could get back in those days were for these three books. We've got The Art of Blacksmithing, Percy Blandford's book, Practical Blacksmithing Metalworking, and Professional Smithing by Donald Streeter. So those three were recommended pretty much because they were the only ones out there. Now these three books come from an era where blacksmithing was really on its last legs. So you had blacksmithing didn't disappear overnight as mechanization took over, as factories took over a lot of the work, and as things got more and more centralized in their production and complicated in their repair and specialized as well, there was less and less call for your average village blacksmith, and they petered out, but they petered out very slowly over the course of the last century. And there was a time in, I'd say, the 60s and the 70s when it looked like blacksmithing would disappear because there was no functional need for it. These books then were written around about that sort of time as a sort of document of something that was dying out. I was just about to mention some other crafts that were dying out, but I won't, because I don't know about those crafts. They've probably undergone a massive revival as well, for all I know. Anyway, so these three books were written during that period, and since then there has been a huge revival of blacksmithing as it's really taken off again as a craft. as a sort of valued craft. So it's not necessary to have a blacksmith make you a fire poker or a candlestick holder, but it's nice, you know, it's going to be a good one, I guess. Anyway, so this chap here, Alec Beeler, went round America chatting to the remaining few blacksmiths that he could find, and he put everything in this book. This particular book suffered terribly from living in a soggy corner of the little cabin for some years. The thing is about this book is that not all of it is actually very good information. Some of the blacksmiths he spoke to, rather than give up what they considered to be trade secrets, just spun him a complete line. And some of the information in here, if you know anything about blacksmithing, just doesn't it doesn't make any sense at all. There's a technique in here for forging a rose, which involves taking a like a 1/4 inch rod and then upsetting it until you can swell it onto rose, which is possible, I suppose, but yeah, a very hard way of going about it. So yeah, unlikely, I think. Anyway, those three, I don't find that useful myself. This is a book that is useful, Basic Blacksmithing, kind of basic blacksmithing. This is aimed at teaching people in Africa and other developing countries how to blacksmith with the absolute minimum of equipment, and it's interesting for that. So with this book, you can make an anvil from a bit of old railway, you can make your tools from bits of old cars, and then you can go on to make tools for other trades using the tools that you've made. And it's very good for that. So that's Basic Blacksmithing. I'll put information on all the books that I recommend in the description. Right, now we come on to, this is quite a good book, but the illustrations let it down to me. This is done in, it's all done on a computer, but the illustrations lack, to my mind, they lack even what a pencil drawing would bring out. For that reason, I've never really turned to this book when I've needed information. Now we come on to some quite famous books. So Peter Parkinson wrote this book, which is quite well known amongst blacksmiths, called The Artist Blacksmith, Design and Techniques. This is a good book. It's a good book to read. I don't find his writing, to me, to be very instructive, and by that I mean when I read the things, I find it the information is useful for putting things into context, but I would struggle to read a technique in here and then go and do it, and that's the case for both of his books. This one is more technical, and there's yes, some of this information has been useful to me in my professional life. But this one, if you're interested in blacksmithing, the artistic side of it, I suppose more so, this is a good book to read. Not necessarily follow, but it's a good reading material. This then is my recommendation of the week. The Complete Blacksmith by Lorelei Sims. And this is very good. This is really good. Even as I was a professional of some years by the time I picked up this book, and I learned a lot from it, which is great. And I learned a lot from this because it goes through things in a very structured way, I'd say, and that's probably just the way I like to pick up information. But it's all here in this book, laid out in a way that I found very easy to consume. And this is a book that I went back to again and again. If I wanted to refresh myself on a certain technique or anything, I'd look in here first, and it's been really good for that. So pick of the week is The Complete Blacksmith by Lorelei Sims. Yeah, she's an American blacksmith. I don't know if she's on YouTube or even still working, but she has produced at least one absolute corker of a book. That then is a sort of high-speed chase through the collection of blacksmithing books that I've got. General metalworking will be covered in its own episode. I think that deserves its own proper look at. This is just forging and blacksmithing, and like I say, that's my pick of the week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.